Hey there, everybody. Today we're going to be taking a look at the first part of Chapter 3, which is all about individual rights and how they are contained within the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We'll be taking a look at what the Charter is, what are some of the rights contained inside of it, and how do we deal with that. So it's pretty short and sweet today. Take a look inside the video. I'll see you in there. Hello there, and this is the beginning of Chapter 3 for Social Studies 9 in Alberta. The idea is all about individual rights, this chapter, and the official title of the chapter is How Effectively Does Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms Protect Your Individual Rights? So as always, we're going to be looking at the possibility of having a continuum here, where you can have an opinion that says maybe Canada is not very effective at protecting our individual rights. Or maybe you could say that Canada is doing a great job and is excellent at protecting our individual rights with the Charter. Maybe you're somewhere in between. It doesn't really matter. But the idea is that the opinion is yours based on what you're seeing here in the chapter and what you know about what's gone on in Canada, what you see happening in the news and all that kind of a thing. So that's what we're looking for. There's three major sections to this chapter, and so I'll be doing this in three parts. This is the first part, the first video, which is all about how the Charter protects individual rights and freedoms. So really, we're going to be looking at what the Charter is and how it protects freedoms. Then in the other two videos, we'll be looking at how the Charter affects lawmaking in Canada and how the Charter affects the workplace. So in this section, we're looking at what is the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Well, the Charter is part of Canada's Constitution. We looked at very briefly the Constitution back in Chapter 1. And so because it's part of the Constitution, it is the highest law in Canada. You cannot supersede it. It is the highest up that you can go. Before the Charter, there was just some provincial and federal laws about individual rights. They could vary by province. But what the Charter does is it gives constitutional protection, which applies to every government all across Canada. And that's important because then it doesn't matter who you are, where you are, the Charter still applies to you. You see here on the right, there's a little picture of a cartoon. And this cartoon is in the book. If you have the textbook, you can take a look at it, but it's all about a kid who gets arrested after a routine search of lockers by a drug-sniffing dog, a bomb-sniffing dog, something like that. Police dog, anyway. Searches lockers, finds something in his locker. He gets arrested for it. He takes it to court. He challenges this arrest, says that his charter rights are violated, and the courts find that indeed they were. You can read that, and it's a great class discussion about what does unreasonable mean, and what does the Charter do with different situations about people who break the law and how they break the law and the situations in which they got arrested. And it's a great class discussion. We don't have time for it here. This is not the place for it, but it's a great cartoon to take a look at and generate some discussion. Now, what the Charter does is two big important things. The first bullet here says that the Charter allows us to challenge in court any laws that restrict our rights. We can say that a right has been restricted by a particular law, and we can actually bring it to court, and the judicial branch will make that decision on whether or not our rights have been violated unjustly. And so they're looking at seeing, is this law just or not? Is this a law that is just? And I'll write that word down because that word comes up a lot. In fact, here, if the court finds that the law has restricted our rights in ways that are unjustified, they can take that law down. But conversely, they can also, and this is in the second bullet here, they can keep a law that restricts our rights if there is a just reason for it. If there's a good reason for this law to restrict our rights, they're allowed to keep it, as long as the reason they're restricting those rights is to keep Canada democratic and free. And there's a quote down here from Chrétien about just the fact that in a free and democratic society, we need to know what our rights are and where to go in case they're violated. And so he mentions the fact that Canada's got all these different types of territorial and provincial governments and different ethnic origins and people from all over the place. It's good to have this constitutionally set rights that apply to everybody, so we're all on the same page. What we're looking for here is equality, essentially. I like that last sentence. We have a Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms that recognizes certain rights for all of us wherever we may live in Canada. Because in the end, we are all the same. We may come from different backgrounds. We may, live in different parts of Canada. We may have different beliefs. At the end of the day, we all are the same inside. We're all humans. We all deserve rights, respect. Now, here's a question that you can talk about more in class that we won't really deal with. Can Alberta restrict our rights then if there are justifiable reasons? I've got a picture of protests during the coronavirus and vaccine mandates and mask mandates and things like that. Is this something that Alberta can do or not? Talk about it in class a bit. See what you think. Now, under the Charter, there are a certain number of rights, and you studied bunches of these back in grade 6, so you're probably aware of some of these. And all these different types of rights, and again, we're looking at the individual rights this chapter. These individual rights are gathered together in different groups, different kinds of rights they put together. The first set, and these sets are things that you're going to need to know and be familiar with. So the first one are the fundamental freedoms, these right here. The fundamental freedoms, think of fundamental being like baseline or foundational or maybe most important. These freedoms cause all the other rights to kind of exist. Think of it maybe that way. These are the seeds that allow the other rights to grow. These fundamental freedoms are summarized as this. They're first, the freedom to express your opinions. You can say what you want about the government. You can not like Trudeau. You can like Trudeau. You can think whatever you want to think, and that's okay. You can express those opinions here in this country. The second thing is the freedom to choose your own religion or choose no religion at all. If you want to believe something, you can believe something. You have the freedom to organize peaceful meetings and demonstrations. So this is the right to protest, the right to be able to gather, to speak your mind as a group, as long as it's peaceful. And you're allowed the freedom to associate with any person or group. And I stress in class the word any because then there are limits to all these rights, of course, which we'll talk about again later on. But the fundamental freedom is that you can associate with any person or group. That's the baseline. The second set of rights that we have are the democratic rights. Now, in some of these cases in the actual charter, you may see that there are other rights given, but these are the most basic ones in each section. In class, we'll be reading through those rights a little bit more specifically, and I would encourage you to read the charter yourself to find out what it actually says in there. This is just a summary of these rights. So under our democratic rights, we have the right to vote for members of the House of Commons and for provincial legislatures, and we have the right to form a new government. In the charter, it says at least every 5 years. In practice, it turns out to be about every 4 years. So we have the right to vote for members of these House of Commons and get a new government about every 4 years or so. Now, I do want to mention something. This right is given to all citizens of Canada, okay? This is one more for citizens. If you are a permanent resident, you cannot vote. You don't have the right to vote, okay? You don't have the right to vote for a new government or members of the House of Commons or provincial legislatures. Also, if you are under 18 years old, as I'm making the video anyway, you're not allowed to vote. So minors and citizens, non-citizens do not have these democratic rights. That's an important distinction. So almost everybody in Canada gets the Charter of Rights and Freedoms applying to them, except for a few cases, and democratic rights is one of those. Mobility rights is the next section, and mobility rights are pretty easy to think. They're basically the right to be able to move around and work where you want in Canada. We can't restrict where you are. We can't say you're not allowed to move. You have to work here in Alberta. You can move where you want. You can get a job where you want. Also, you have the right to enter, stay in, or leave Canada. Again, mobility rights also could be restricted in certain cases. When you read the charter, you'll find there's all kinds of details about, well, we have mobility rights except in these circumstances. You can look at those in more detail. But the basic idea behind mobility rights, you can come in, you can stay, you can leave, you can move where you want, you can work where you want. That's what the rights are. The next set of rights are your legal rights. These are rights about the law primarily. So the first is ones that we're used to a little bit from last chapter. You have the right to be free from imprisonment, from search and seizure without reasons, backed by law and evidence. Again, you're allowed to get locked up. You're allowed to get thrown in jail. Has to be done with reasons, backed by evidence, backed by the law. They just can't lock up anybody for any reason. Okay? Also, you have the right to a fair and quick public trial by an impartial court that assumes that you are innocent until proven guilty. And we talked a little bit about that last chapter. Innocent until proven guilty. Those are your basic legal rights. And then equality rights. The right to be free from discrimination because of race, national or ethnic origin, religion, gender, age, or mental or physical disability. We're pretty used to this one. We're pretty okay with equality rights, hearing about it quite a bit in the news, around the world, in our classrooms. And those are a very, very quick summary of the individual rights that we have. Now, I have this on the slides. Be familiar with the language of the Charter because, you could get tested on it, but it's also it's really a good document to know. I don't think, I know a lot of Americans say they've read the Constitution, they've read the Bill of Rights, but they really haven't. They assume they know what's in them. They know a few of them, but they haven't actually gone through. And I think it's important for us as Canadians to be able to know what the rights we have are and when we can exercise them and when they might be limited and, what goes on with them. So just know what each part of those individual rights are, what they mean in general. We'll get more specific in class. We'll talk about all the exceptions and this and that. But for the basic idea, you just need to know what are those fundamental freedoms and equality rights and democratic rights and mobility rights, etc., and know what those rights are, okay, on a very basic level. That's going to close up this section of the notes. That's about all we have to say for now. So we'll be back with a video talking about the next section of the chapter soon. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.